Okay, so while we're on topics that are kind of behind the scenes, things that happen when we run our code, we talked about the execution context. I want to also talk about the call stack. This is something that will be important later on when you get into more advanced JavaScript. But I just want you to understand the basics of it. So when we run a function, we know that it opens up a new function execution context. It also gets added to something called the call stack. Now, a stack is a data structure in not just JavaScript, but in many programming languages. And it operates in a very specific way. It's last in, first out, or LIFO, meaning that the last thing to come on is the first thing to come off. And the next slide will give you a better visualization of that. But the call stack is, you can think of it as a manager for your functions or a manager for your execution context. And at the bottom of the stack, you have your global execution context. And then when a function is invoked, that gets put on the call stack. When it's done, it gets popped off. All right, so if we look at this very basic piece of code here, we're running three functions or creating three functions, first, second, third, and then running them. Okay, and we're doing this all in the global scope. They're all being run in the global scope. So what happens here is the first function is invoked. It gets pushed onto the stack. That's the terminology, just like with arrays, push and pop. So it gets pushed on, first ends, and then gets popped off. Then second runs, gets pushed on, popped off. Then third runs, gets pushed on, popped off. So that's how this piece of code would work with the call stack. Now, this piece of code is a little different. So we have first, second, and third, but we're just running first in the global scope, and then in first we're running second, and then in second we're running third. So what happens is we run first, it gets pushed on. While first is running, second is run, so that gets put on top of first because first is still running, it's still open. And then in second, third gets called, so second is still running, so third gets pushed on. When third ends, third gets popped off, and then second ends, gets popped off, first popped off. So it's the same thing. It's last in, first out. So what I want to do now is show you that those same two pieces of code in the browser and show you the call stack in the sources tab. So as you can see, I have the first example I showed you here. I have the second one commented out for now. And I'm going to go to the sources tab and go to script.js, and what I'm going to do is put my breakpoint right at the first function where it's called, and then I'm going to reload the page. And right now it hasn't run anything. Once I click this arrow, it'll run this line, the first function. And if you look down here, there's actually a tab called call stack, and you can see right now first is on top of is first on top of the global execution context. That's what this anonymous is. All right, so first gets put on the stack, and then let's step through it again, finish it up. Now we're going to run second. Second gets pushed on the stack, step through it, it gets popped off. Let's run third. That gets pushed on, we step through it, and then it gets popped off. All right, so that's how this piece of code works, just like I showed you in the slide. Now I'm going to just comment this out, and the second example, I'm going to uncomment that. So remember, this is where we're actually running second in first and third in second. So I just want to show you how this would work. So we'll come down here. Actually, let's just reload this whole thing real quick, and then I'm going to put my breakpoint right here at first, and then reload. And then if we run the function, you'll see that first is put on the stack. Now it's going to go to second, which is still in first. Okay, and we'll run that, and now look, second is on top of first. Inside second, we run third, so let's do that, and now third is on top of second. So this looks exactly like the diagram that I just showed you. All right, and then if we step through, third will end, gets popped off. Now you can see second is on top. We'll run that, that gets popped off. First, that gets popped off. So I just wanted you to understand at a very basic level how the call stack works. So in the next section, we're going to start to look at control flow and logic and conditionals.